So I wanted to create a video to show you the colours that I use for bay horses. Now, I don't know whether you can see all of these pencils here. This is basically all of the pencils that I've used in this portrait. There are probably some that I've used and have forgotten to put in, but basically you can see there's quite a few little ones in there as well. And what I thought I'd do is just take you through some of the colour combinations I've used to get the brightness, the shadows, some of the highlights, that type of thing. Now, when I work on horses' eyes, I tend to use Polychromos just because you can get a really good sharp point on them. They're relatively hard, so you can get some nice detail in. Now for the eyes, I always start with the Polychromos Dark Sepia, which is this one. Now the Polychromos, like I say, they're hard. You can get a really nice point on them. I tend to not use really sharp pencils, but this is pretty sharp for me. These are oil-based pencils, highly light fast, and just, you know, really good quality. So I tend to, all of my portraits, I tend to start with this one colour. The dark sepia is a good colour. It's a neutral grey, so you know you can kind of use it in replacement for black if you want. It's just a really good colour to make a start with. So that's the first pencil I use to make a start on the eye. When I draw eyes, just find the next colour here, I always use the Polychromos Dark Indigo. So I always use that for the pupil, and I put it in quite faintly to begin with, just to sort of block out some of the shapes and everything like that. And then I will use probably a combination of, again, Polychromos, the burnt ochre, which is this one, and the terracotta, which is this more orangey one. And I'll use those you know, for sort of like browny orangey eyes. This horse has got a particularly orangey eye, so I'll use those in there together with burnt sienna, again the Faber Castell Polychromos. I'll use the burnt sienna in there in the eye, and then I'll also use, let's see if I can find it, the Caput Mortuum Violet. So the Caput Mortuum Violet over the top of the oranges gives that really lovely burnt orangey look. And then I will just bring in the black, Polychromos Black, you know, and start to build up the you know, the darker areas, start to really pull in all of that darkness. Now on top of all of that, I use this pencil all of the time. So this is the Polychromos Warm Grey 2. This is a really fantastic pencil for use on Pastelmat, which I've drawn this on, but it's also really good for creating the highlights and everything, and the catch lights in eyes. It will go, you can get light over dark on the Pastelmat, so you know, just drawing over the top of the oranges, you get this lovely shine, and that's how I get my eyes looking quite realistic, is using this particular pencil. It's absolutely fantastic. So those are the eye colours for this particular horse, and these are kind of standard really. These colours are standard really for animals that have got sort of like that orangey coloured eye. These are the pencils that I'll use. And then I'll also, quite a lot of the time, we'll bring in the this is looking a bit grubby, I'm afraid. I think it's been on the floor and been chewed. It's the cadmium orange. Again, a really good colour for eyes. Just sort of like little touches in the catch lights here and there, especially on the bottom of the eye. This works really well. So all Polychromos for the eyes. You know, you can get a good sharp point on them. They're hard, so you can get some really nice details in there. So when we come to put those back in. When we come to the orangey areas on the ears, and sort of like, I mean, this horse, it's a bay horse, you've got some real orangey colours in here, and then you've also got all of the sort of like the darker areas in there. So what I tend to do is I will use, so I tend to start my layers using the Derwent Studios. and these are just 5 of the Derwent Studio browns that I use on a regular basis. So for a horse of this colour, that's that bay, bright bay, you've got some really, really lovely orangey areas, you've got some quite reddy areas, and then you've got some sort of darker areas. I'll always start with this one, which is, it's a bit faded, but it's the burnt yellow ochre. And this is a really, really fantastic base to use on the Pastelmat. So I'll use this as my first layer, and then I will layer up using the Copper Beech, which is it's a really nice brown, together with the Venetian red. So I will layer those 3 colours up. So my first 3 layers will be those 3. Sometimes I might use more of the Venetian red if it's much more reddy coloured. Sometimes I will use much more of the burnt yellow ochre if it's a little bit more orangey, you know. So and in here as well, and those will be my first few layers. I'll then, depending on the hues, I might bring in the raw umber, which is going to just knock those reddy colours back a little bit, and it will start to, like in here, it will start to just bring in almost like a greeny colour. So this is a really, really good colour to combine with the more reddy tones, because it just pushes it back slightly. And then we've got the chocolate, which is fantastic just for bringing some dark areas in. Now those are going to be your initial layers, and then on top of those I will then use, so for the orangey areas, I'll just do them that way and then you can kind of see. So over the top of those studios I will bring in a few of these different colours. Okay, so you'll see quite a few purples in here. So we've got the taupe, light fast taupe, we've got the violet grey luminance, we've got the violet brown luminance, we've got the manganese violet, and then I also need the violet, here we go, and that's the luminance violet. So all of these colours here are the shadow colours. So these are all going to be the areas that are in shadow or darker. So all of these areas around here, down in here, down sort of like the ridge of the nose here, into these areas here, and kind of in the neck area down here as well. These are the colours that I would bring in. Now the reason that I would use violets in the shadows is because they are the opposite of the oranges, and these are, there's another violet there as well, that's the light fast nightshade, so that would go in the real darker areas in here. So these are all opposite of the oranges that I'm going to be using, so the opposite on, or complementary colours on the colour wheel. So these are all going to work really, really well with my more orangey colours. And that's the reason why I put them into the shadows. So we've got Persian Orange Light Fast, which is a brilliant, brilliant orange, I have to say. It's like a browny orange, perfect for animal fur because it doesn't go too brightly orange. It's kind of quite muted. I've got the burnt ochre luminance. Sadly it's all worn off at the end there, but that's the burnt ochre luminance. Again, another really, really good colour for sort of like all of these orangey areas in here. And then we've got the burnt sienna Polychromos. So I will mix my different makes. Usually I will choose colours for how they feel, pencils for how they feel on the paper. So I will choose my Polychromos because they're, like I said before, they're quite hard. You can get a good point. They're really good for detailing. The light fast are really nice and soft, so you can actually get quite a lot of pressure down onto the paper and get a really nice coverage. But I would tend to use my light fast over the top, so I wouldn't use them as an initial layer as such. I prefer to use a harder pencil as my first layers because you don't get as much pigment down on the Pastelmat, and the more pigment you get down on the Pastelmat in those early layers, the more grainy it can be. So I tend to use my harder pencils so I get more of a finer first few layers, and then I can use my softer pencils over the top of that. And the same goes for the Luminance. The reason I use the Luminance on something like this is usually down to the colour. So the Polychromos don't really have a good range of violet-y colours. The Lightfast and the Luminance do have a really, really good set of violet colours. The Luminance particularly have got a really good set of purples and violets that you can use, you know, within your sort of orangey coloured fur. And these, you know, they really are good. And what's lovely about the Luminance is that they're very opaque. So if you put them over the top of another colour, then you can see it. You know, it kind of layers over the other colours really, really well. So you can see in this area here, I've got some, I think it's the manganese violet or something like that in here. So you can see it's come in really, really nicely. And then I've also got some of the violet grey in this area down here. And you can see again, it's layered over really nicely, you know, over the top of the darker colours. So that's one of the reasons why I would use the Luminance, is because they're more opaque and because of the colour. Oops. So another really, really good colour in the Luminance range is the Pyroline Brown. And this isn't a colour that I've used very regularly up until recently. It's quite a vibrant, reddy brown. But it's really, really, really good for just bringing out certain areas if you've got a horse this colour. You know, so a little bit into the shadows because it is a bit darker, and you can just get some really, really nice vibrancy in the shadows. And again, mixed with the violets, works incredibly well. So those are, oh, and then of course you've got the Caput Mortem Violet, which is a really fantastic colour. And actually that combined with the dark indigo, they're fantastic colours for this colour horse as well. So down in here, this area here, I'll start off by putting my oranges in. My studios will go in first. Then I might maybe put in some of the Persian orange into here, layer it over the studios. Then I might start to build up the colours a little bit more using the Caput Mortem Violet. And then what I'll do is I'll put the dark indigo over the top. And the dark indigo over the top of the Caput Mortem Violet gives you sort of almost like a maroony colour. You know, so you might have something that's just looking a little bit too red, and then you put your dark indigo over the top of it, and it just knocks it back slightly. So they're a really good combination of colours to use, you know, for bay horses. And then of course you can use so I've got my nightshade here, which is that really dark purpley colour. Which is wonderful. The only thing you've got to be careful of with that then is if you put this dark the nightshade into here, and then if you wanted to pull some lighter colours in, the problem that you've just got to try and avoid is if you put white over the top of the nightshade, it goes a really, really pale purple, and you don't want that. So you kind of need to plan that in first of all, you know, or use a very, very pale blue instead. So you could use the light cobalt blue, the Luminance light cobalt blue, over the top of your nightshade to give you like a little bit of a sheen and a highlight. So putting this in here, you're not going to get that light pink or the light purple because you're using a blue rather than the white. So things like that are really, really useful to have a play around with. It's like I've used all sorts of different blues in the main. I've used some purples, and I've used some of the reddy colours as well. You know, putting the light cobalt blue into areas like this where you've got the really nice light highlight works really, really well. The cobalt blue over the top of black, like I said, it's a really, really opaque pencil, so you can get it to shine, and you can get it to really, really stand out on the black really well. So this, for black animals instead of using white, works brilliantly. what else have we got? We've got all of the... So we've... So we've got a load of different greys as well here, you know, that I would use depending on kind of the lighting and all of that type of thing. The best grey that I've used in here is the Pablo, the Caran Pablo light grey. This is again it's quite an opaque pencil. So when you sort of put it in over the top of the dark colours, it really does show nicely, and you can get some really, really lovely details in there. You can also use it over the top of sort of the darker colours to get some of your highlights, which is really good. And in the white blaze down here, you can just bring it in lightly just to add in a little bit of definition. This one as well on Pastelmat is going to smooth, so anything you layer over the top of with this pencil, it's going to smooth it out. So you put your first layer down, it'll be quite rough. You use this pencil, it'll really, really smooth it out. It'll you know, you don't have to use hard pressure at all, just very, very lightly sitting over the top of those layers, and it'll smooth out everything that's underneath it, which is, you know, it's amazing. It really is a good pencil. We've then got we've got the Magic Wand Warm Grey 2 again. So this used over, like the light grey, this used over any of the colour, that's going to smooth it out too. You're going to be able to lighten colours up slightly, you know, if you just want to knock back a little bit of the brown, a little bit of the red, that type of thing. You know, you're going to be able to do that. That's the Faber Castell Polychromos Warm Grey 2. I mean, every coloured pencil artist should have that in their kit. And then we've got the Cold Grey 1, you know, really good for whites because it is such a light colour. I use that quite a lot in the leather work, but also in like little highlights up here, maybe a few little highlights in the mane, down here, and the highlights, you know, in the muzzle area. Because it's so light, I don't really use white, but because this is such a light colour, you can afford to kind of go a little bit harder with the pressure, you know, and start to really build up those nice tonal qualities and everything. And then there's the Cold Grey 2 as well, which again, you know, you can use sort of like in white areas, you can use just to sort of push back colours slightly, bring out some highlights, that type of thing. And then I've got a couple more Pablos here. We've got the Cocoa, which is a really fabulous colour. It's like cocoa, would you believe? It's like a really, really nice warm grey. Again, really nice, sort of like in some of the strands in the forelock. You know, some of the areas sort of around the eye might have like a bit of a grey colour in there, and again it's going to smooth everything that you layer over the top of, just because of how the pigment works in the Pablos, really. And again, around sort of like in the muzzle area, just really, really nice and soft, and it's a lovely, lovely warm colour, so works really nicely with the oranges. And then you've also got the brownish beige. You know, we're drawing sort of like a bay horse. There are areas that are just that little bit lighter, so there might be some areas around the muzzle area that you just want to add a little bit of lightness to. You know, and this is again a really good colour to use. It's quite nice and neutral, but it's also very soft and will you know, smooth everything that you put over the top of it. So those are the lighter greys. So then we've got some more of the some more unusual colours, and then the final black. So this is my Derwent Drawing Ivory Black. This is a very, very, very soft pencil. It's wax, but it's incredibly soft, and you can get some really, really, really deep blacks with this. So I would come in final touches, you know, really darken up areas in the mane, darken areas up here in this, you know, where the muscle and everything on the horse's neck is down here. Just start to sort of lift that contrast very slightly and get the darks really, really dark. And that works really well with that Derwent drawing with the Ivory Black. It's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant black. We've then got some of the lighter colours. So I've got the Granite Rose. So this is the Pablo Granite Rose. This one we've used kind of in here. I've used a little bit in here. I've used in here a little bit, and I've used around the sort of muzzle area. It gives it a little bit of a lift. You know, wherever you need that little tiny sort of bit of extra something, again, it's going to smooth everything underneath it, and it works really well with the oranges. So pink works really, really well with oranges, I suppose because it's a derivative of the violets and everything like that. So it's a really good colour to use, and it will smooth as well, which is good. So the Granite Rose is another good one to use in your bay horses. I've got the light ochre. Again, this is a Pablo, and I've used that kind of in and around here, in some of these areas where it's a little bit lighter, maybe up around the eye area, into the ears a little bit, but particularly around the muzzle. It's just a really good colour. The Pablo have a similar one called Orangish Yellow, I think it's, or yellowish orange, one of the two. Quite similar, but just a little bit lighter. But the light ochre, again, really, really good colour, and you know, particularly for these bay horses that are a little bit lighter around the muzzle area. And then we have this is in a pencil holder, but this is the Faber Castell Polychromos Ivory. So again, it's a hard pencil, so wherever I would use it, if I'm going over the top of other layers, I'm going to have to either just whisk it in or use a little bit harder pressure. This one will probably be used to add in hairlines rather than sort of blending anything, so I'm going to be adding texture with this one because it's that little bit harder. Again, it's got good coverage, but it's not quite as opaque as some of the softer pencils like the Lightfast and the Luminance. You know, so when you put it on, it's kind of a little bit more transparent when you put it on if you've done quite a few layers. But you know, a good one for sort of blocking in, a good one for doing those initial layers and everything. Then we've got Primrose, which is the Luminance. Again, I've used the Primrose down here. Again, it's a little bit more opaque, so you can see the colours coming through a bit more. Using this sort of as a, you know, you can see when I put it on here, you can actually see the colour going on. You know, it's just a good colour, is this one. You know, I chose it because it kind of matched the colour for the muzzle area and everything like that, so it was just a good one to use. You know, might not use it a huge amount, but use it around the eyes. And then we've got the Apricot. So this is the Luminance Apricot. This is absolutely brilliant for just the areas of orange where you just need to really, really highlight a little bit more. You know, so up in this area here, you might just want a few little sort of tweaky bits of a slightly brighter orange without it being in your face orange. Down here you might just want it a little bit brighter as well, so just bringing this in places, and down here on the muzzle where there's this little bit of light was perfect for that. And again, it will mix really, really nicely with your violets and purples. Then we've got the Polychromos brown ochre. So sometimes when you put your oranges in, they're a little bit in your face, they're a little bit too bright. So using something like a brown ochre, which is much more greeny coloured rather than reddy coloured, using that just to glaze very slightly over the top of your brighter colours will have the effect of just pushing it back a little bit and making it a little bit less reddy. So your brown ochres, your Bista, you know, anything like that, there's more of a greeny brown is a really, really good one to bring in and complement those reddy colours. And then we've got a couple more blues here, the Polychromos Blue, we've got light ultramarine and we've got ultramarine. These again, really good for sort of like highlighty areas, in the mane, in here as well. And anywhere where you think, oh, there's a little bit of blue there, you know, you can just sort of add in just that little sort of touch of blue, and it'll add like a highlight. Just be careful when you're using it with orangey and yellowy colours, because obviously you will end up with green, you know, so you just need to kind of plan your colours a little bit. But again, you know, using these in your white areas, areas that are a little bit lighter, using these sorts of blues in there works really, really well. So you've got a huge range of colours that have gone into this horse. I mean, I'm sure you could do it with just, you know, a handful of pencils. I mean, I do tend to use quite a few, you know, so there are quite a lot of pencils in this particular piece that I've done. But the combinations that you use for the fur colours it's very personal. You know, I like to use those sort of brighter colours. I like to kind of bring out the bright oranges. I like to tone it back a little bit with the purples and everything. I just think it lends itself to, you know, creating a nice portrait, really. So you know, if you didn't want to go quite as bright, then you could use sort of more greys, I guess, instead of purples. Or just tone the purples back a little bit, you know, using sort of like maybe a blue rather than a purple, so it's not quite as bright. But you know, your purples are always going to be the better colour to use for your shadows when you're drawing something like this, sort of like you know, an orangey coloured horse. This is, you know, bright bay horse. Your purples are always going to be your best choice for the shadows. You know, no matter whether you're going for something bright or not. So I hope that's been useful. I'm thinking I might do this for each portrait that I finish, you know, just to kind of talk you through the colours that I've used and why. You know, so to recap, the Polychromos they're oil-based, they're harder, they're really good for details, they're good for your initial layer going down. Your Derwent Studios, again, they're wax based, they're hard, a really good first base for the Pastelmat. And then you've got the Luminance, the Pablos, and the Lightfast. The Lightfast are oil based, Luminance, and I'm not sure whether Pablos are oil based or wax based. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, they're all wax and oil anyway in you know, specific percentages. So but they're the more softer side of the pencils. I find the Pablos are quite soft, not as soft as the Luminance and not as soft as the Lightfast, but I like to use those on subsequent layers. So I use my harder pencils on the bottom layers and my softer ones on the top, but it's not set in stone, you know, so it could be that actually I'll use you know, a Lightfast as my first base if I think that's the better colour. So usually it's to do with feel, but if a colour is the perfect colour, then I'll use that instead, you know. So there's no right or wrong, it's just what works best for you, really. Yeah, so I hope that's been useful, just to kind of talk through the colours. Yeah, let me know what you think.